Ghosts. Like the title suggests, Chimamanda's story Ghost mainly dwells on how people face and deal with past ghosts, thus informing their present and future. Professor James Nwoye currently lives in a corrupt part of Nigeria where the medical field provides people with counterfeit drugs. When the story opens, the 71-year-old professor of mathematics is walking the grounds of the university bursary, where he is following up on his pension, which he does not get. The many other retirees that he meets are equally frustrated. They associate the failure to get their retirement benefits to the corruption of the education minister or the university's vice-chancellor. Professor James chats for a while with his former driver Vincent, who is to survive the harsh times serving as a cobbler around the university hostel. Vincent inquires about Nkiru, Professor James's daughter who lives in America, and James informs him that she is well. The suffering of the people is highlighted in their appearance and hunger. One of the men gathered under a tree requests Professor to buy them bananas as hunger was killing them. Even as he buys them bananas, Professor ironically observes that what they needed was some moisturizer to soften their skin. After leaving the group, Professor James meets with Ikenna Okoro, a man thought to be long dead. The encounter shocked Professor as he believed that Ikenna, a former colleague and a renowned activist, had died in the Biafran Civil War on July 6, 1967. When he initially saw him, he thought of throwing sand at him, which was what people do to ghosts. However, his education and the fact that he was walking on concrete grounds prevent him from doing it. The encounter between the two drives Professor down memory lane. He remembers their days at the university where Ikenna rebelled when asked to put on ties. He further remembers how Ikenna acted as an activist fighting for non-academic staff to have better conditions. A flashback, Professor recalls their evacuation from Nsukka on July 6, 1967, when the Civil War began. On that day, Ikenna, who stubbornly insisted on going back to the university to get his manuscript, was said to have died. Ikenna discloses that he escaped Biafra that day on a Red Cross plane that took him to Sweden. He painfully explains that he saw no need to return after the war since all his family was killed when Olu was bombed. On his part, Professor James went to America with his wife Ebere but came back in 1970 when the Civil War ended. However, they were devastated to find everything in their home destroyed, and their piano was missing. They thus returned to America and only returned to Nsukka in 1976. When Ikenna inquires about their daughter Zik, Professor painfully answers in Igbo that the war took her. He, however, tells him that they got another daughter after the war. The two talk about life during and after the war, with each mentioning their worst moments. Ikenna asks Professor James about his wife Ebere, and James replies that she died 3 years ago. He tells him that she visits him. Ikenna appears surprised at the disclosure, so James corrects himself and says that Ebere visited America quite often since their daughter works there as a doctor. Knowing that Ikenna is educated just like him, James knows that Ikenna does not believe in ghosts. He, too, never believed in them until his wife visited him 3 weeks after the burial. The two talk about the situation ever since the war ended and how things have significantly changed. They point out at the rot in the university, where instead of teaching, people are playing politics, and instead of reading and working hard, students are buying grades either with money or their bodies. The corruption in the university offices does not escape them. James reports how one Josephat Udiana, a vice-chancellor for 6 years, ran the university like his father's chicken coop, leading to the disappearance of money and favoritism in promoting workers. James notes that the current vice-chancellor is not any different, thus why he has yet to get his retirement benefits. He further explains how people are bribing to have their years before retirement added since nobody wants to retire. Ikenna raises the sensitive topic about fake drugs. It triggers painful memories in James since his wife Ebere is thought to have died because of counterfeit drugs. James dismissively says that counterfeit drugs are horrible in efforts to avoid this topic. He parts ways with Ikenna after telling him how he has been resting ever since he retired. He extends an invitation to Ikenna to join him in his home, but Ikenna turns it down. Once in his home, Professor James turns on the TV and remembers how a man accused of importing fake drugs had justified this act through a TV interview on NTA. The man had explained that his drugs do not kill people but only fail to cure their illness. He wonders why news about Ikenna being alive never came up, yet there were various other stories of the living ghosts people thought to be dead but turned up alive. The tale ends with Professor James in his study hoping that his daughter Ikenna will call to tell him about their grandson, and if she does not, he will go to bed and await the visit of Ebere.